It was 2 a.m. The entire city was asleep, but one man was awake. He sat alone in a dark room with the lights turned off, staring at an old notebook placed in front of him. Every page carried names. People who betrayed him. People who laughed at him. People who underestimated him. And on the last page, only one sentence was written. Weak men run from pain. Strong men turn pain into a weapon. That is where everything changes. The world teaches you to be nice, stay calm, obey the rules, smile more, trust people, and avoid conflict. But it never teaches you the real law of survival. The truth is, mental strength is not motivation. It is psychological warfare, a weapon so dangerous that once a man masters it, he becomes impossible to control. And that is exactly why society hides these truths from you. Because mentally strong people are difficult to manipulate. Today, you are going to hear 11 cold truths about mental strength that most people will never understand. Truths that create dangerous men. Not loud men, not emotional men, dangerous men. The first truth: the strongest people are usually the loneliest. Look around carefully. Weak people constantly need someone beside them. Validation, attention, approval, relationships, distractions. Their entire identity depends on how other people see them. If people ignore them, their confidence disappears. If someone leaves them, their entire world collapses. If someone criticizes them, they lose themselves completely. That is slavery. Machiavelli once said, "He who cannot command himself will always be a servant." Mental strength begins the moment you learn how to sit alone, without your phone, without noise, without fake entertainment, without needing someone to comfort you. Because loneliness exposes who you truly are. When you sit alone in silence, there are no masks left, no fake personality, no performance, no distractions, only you and the voice inside your head. And most people are terrified of that voice. That is why they constantly drown themselves in noise, scrolling endlessly, watching meaningless content, talking to random people, jumping from one relationship to another, anything, just to avoid meeting themselves. But mentally strong people do not run from the darkness. They sit inside it. They study it. They understand it. And eventually, they become comfortable there. Remember this carefully. The man who is no longer afraid of loneliness becomes impossible to break. The second truth: emotionally detached people are the most dangerous people alive. Society tells you to be emotional, follow your heart, be sensitive, care deeply, trust people. But reality works differently. The more emotional you become, the easier you are to control. Because emotions blind people. When you become emotionally attached to someone, you stop seeing clearly, you ignore red flags, you excuse disrespect, you forgive manipulation, you tolerate betrayal, and the other person silently gains power over you. Dark psychology operates on one simple principle: the person who controls emotions controls the situation. That is why mentally strong people rarely react emotionally. If someone insults them, they stay calm. If someone ignores them, they do not chase. If someone leaves them, they do not beg. Why? Because they understand something most people never learn. Attachment creates suffering. Now understand this carefully. Emotionally detached does not mean emotionless. Strong people feel deeply, but they are not slaves to their feelings. Their mind stays above their emotions, and that makes them dangerous, because emotional people are predictable. Calm people are unreadable, and unreadable people hold power. The third truth: mental strength has nothing to do with happiness. This is where most people get confused. Social media sells a fantasy. Stay positive. Always smile. Good vibes only. But mentally strong people are not always happy. Sometimes they feel empty. Sometimes they feel lost. Sometimes they feel emotionally numb. Sometimes they stay awake at night, staring into darkness, questioning everything. But the difference is, they do not escape pain. They use it. Look at history carefully. Most dangerous men were created through suffering, pain, humiliation, rejection, loneliness, betrayal. These things either destroy a man or transform him into something colder. And cold people rarely lose control because they no longer expect the world to be fair. Mental strength does not mean you stop feeling pain. It means you continue moving forward despite the pain. When motivation disappears, you still move. When nobody supports you, you still move. When life feels meaningless, you still move. Weak men depend on emotions. Strong men depend on discipline. That is the difference. The fourth truth: silence is one of the deadliest psychological weapons. Weak people constantly explain themselves. I didn't mean that. Please understand me. That's not who I am. But mentally strong people do not waste energy explaining everything because they understand human nature. People see what they want to see. Some will misunderstand you no matter how much proof you give them. Machiavelli understood this deeply. Men judge more by the eye than by the hand. That is why powerful people reveal very little. They speak less, observe more, because the more you speak, the more information people gain about your mind. But silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates psychological pressure. Notice something carefully. The most dangerous people in every room are usually the quietest ones, not because they are weak, but because they already mastered the chaos inside themselves. They no longer react emotionally to everything around them. They conserve energy, and people who conserve energy play the long game. The fifth truth: the world respects results, not struggles. This truth hurts, but it is real. Nobody cares how depressed you were, how broken you felt, how lonely your nights were, how badly life treated you. The world only asks one question: did you win or lose? The moment a man understands this, he stops behaving like a victim. He stops asking, why is this happening to me? Because he realizes something brutal. Life is unfair, and weak people get destroyed by unfair realities. No one is coming to save you. No magical motivation is coming. No hero is coming. No miracle is coming. One day, you must stand up alone. You must fight your own mind. Control your own emotions. Build your own discipline. And that is the moment you stop becoming ordinary. But the darkest truths are still ahead, because in the next section, we will enter the psychological habits that slowly transform a man into someone emotionally cold, unreadable, and mentally untouchable. The sixth truth: most people do not want you to become mentally strong. They only want you weak enough to control. Understand this carefully. The moment you stop seeking validation, people become uncomfortable. The moment you stop explaining yourself, people call you arrogant. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, people think you changed. But the truth is, you finally woke up. Weak people are easy to manipulate because their emotions can be controlled. Compliment them, and they trust you. Ignore them, and they chase you. Give them attention, and they become addicted. Take attention away, and they collapse. That is why society rewards emotional dependency, because dependent people obey easily. A mentally strong man becomes dangerous because he no longer needs constant approval. He can walk away. He can stay silent. He can survive alone, and people fear men they cannot emotionally control. Notice how the world reacts when a man becomes emotionally disciplined. Friends start saying, "You've changed." Relationships start failing. People accuse him of becoming cold. But what actually happened? He stopped allowing others to drain his energy, and that threatens people who benefited from his weakness. This is why growth often feels lonely, because every new level of mental strength kills the old version of you, and not everyone will survive that transformation. The seventh truth: discipline matters more than motivation. This is where weak men destroy themselves. They wait to feel ready. They wait for motivation, for the perfect mood, for inspiration. But mentally strong people understand something terrifying. Feelings are unreliable. Some days you will feel powerful. Other days you will feel completely broken. If your actions depend on emotions, your life will always remain unstable. Discipline changes everything, because discipline forces action even when emotions disappear. And that is where real power begins. Anybody can work hard when they feel motivated, but very few people can continue moving when their mind is tired, stressed, distracted, and emotionally exhausted. That is mental strength. To continue anyway, to wake up when your body wants sleep, to work when your mind wants comfort, to stay focused when distractions attack you from everywhere. Most people become slaves to temporary emotions. Mentally strong people become slaves to long-term goals. That is why they eventually dominate, because consistency defeats talent every single time. The eighth truth: people respect what they fear losing. This is one of the darkest realities of human psychology. When you become too available, people stop valuing you. When you constantly chase, people lose respect. When you tolerate everything, people slowly start taking advantage of you, because humans are wired to value scarcity. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. A prince who is too generous becomes weak, and the same rule applies to people. If your time is always available, your value drops. If your attention is cheap, people stop appreciating it. Mentally strong people understand boundaries. They know when to walk away, when to stay silent, when to disappear. And strangely, distance creates respect faster than desperation ever will. Weak people fear losing others. Strong people fear losing themselves. That is why mentally strong men never beg for attention. They understand something cold. The moment you start begging for love, respect, or validation, you already lost power. The ninth truth: your mind becomes whatever you repeatedly feed it. Most people poison their own minds every single day without realizing it. Negative content, meaningless entertainment, cheap dopamine, endless distractions. Then they wonder why they feel mentally weak. Your brain adapts to whatever you repeatedly consume. If you constantly feed it weakness, it becomes weak. If you constantly feed it chaos, it becomes chaotic. This is why mentally strong people protect their minds carefully. They understand that attention is power, and modern society is designed to steal that power from you. Every notification, every short video, every distraction, all of it slowly destroys your ability to focus. And once focus dies, discipline dies with it. That is why weak people cannot sit still anymore. Silence feels uncomfortable to them. Their brain becomes addicted to stimulation. But mentally strong people train themselves differently. They learn how to control focus. And a focused man becomes extremely dangerous in a distracted world. Because while everyone else is wasting years chasing dopamine, he is building power silently. The 10th truth. Most battles are won before they even begin. Weak people focus only on physical strength, but mentally strong people understand psychology. Confidence changes behavior. Behavior changes perception. Perception changes outcomes. The moment you enter a room uncertain, nervous, desperate, or insecure, people feel it immediately. Humans detect weakness faster than words. That is why mentally strong people master emotional control first. They do not panic easily. They do not react impulsively. They do not expose desperation, because calmness itself creates authority. Look at dangerous people throughout history. Many of them were not physically powerful, but psychologically, they controlled rooms, controlled conversations, controlled emotions, controlled fear, because power is often mental before it becomes physical. The man who controls himself gains influence over others naturally, and that is exactly why emotional self-control intimidates weak people. The 11th truth. True mental strength often turns a man cold. This is the truth nobody wants to admit. When a man suffers enough, he changes. After enough betrayal, he trusts less. After enough disappointment, he expects less. After enough pain, he stops reacting emotionally. And eventually, he becomes emotionally harder to reach. Not because he hates people, but because experience taught him something brutal. People are temporary. Promises are temporary. Feelings are temporary. Loyalty is temporary. Most people only stay while circumstances benefit them. And once a man fully understands this reality, he stops building his life around others. He builds it around himself. That is when he becomes mentally dangerous. Because now, his happiness does not depend on external validation anymore. His peace does not depend on attention anymore. His confidence does not depend on relationships anymore. He becomes self-contained. And self-contained men are extremely difficult to manipulate. But here is the final dark truth. Mental strength is not beautiful. It is painful. It is built through sleepless nights, isolation, self-control, sacrifice, disappointment, war inside your own mind. Nobody becomes mentally powerful through comfort. Pressure creates strength. Pain creates awareness, and loneliness reveals character. That is why most people never reach true mental strength. Because the process is ugly. Most quit halfway. Most run back toward comfort. But the few who survive it become different, calmer, sharper, harder to manipulate, harder to break. And once a man reaches that stage, the world treats him differently, because people can sense when someone has mastered himself. And a man who has mastered himself becomes dangerous in a world full of emotional slaves. So the real question is not, do you want mental strength? The real question is, are you willing to suffer enough to build it? Because every powerful mind was once created in darkness. And some people never escape that darkness again. There is something even darker about mental strength that nobody talks about. The stronger your mind becomes, the harder it becomes for you to relate to normal people. At first, you think mental strength will make life easier, but eventually, you realize it changes the way you see everyone around you. You start noticing fake behavior instantly. You notice forced smiles, fake loyalty, manipulative kindness, hidden jealousy behind compliments. You begin reading people differently, not through their words, but through patterns. And once you start seeing patterns, innocence disappears forever. That is why many mentally strong people become quieter with time. Not because they are shy, but because they understand too much. They realize most conversations are fake. Most friendships are conditional. Most people only stay loyal when life is convenient. And this realization changes a person deeply, especially men. Because men are raised believing loyalty is real, hard work is always rewarded, and good intentions are enough. Then, life destroys those illusions one by one. A betrayal teaches him trust is fragile. A failure teaches him effort guarantees nothing. A heartbreak teaches him emotions can become weapons. And slowly, he stops seeing the world emotionally. He starts seeing it strategically. That is the exact moment mental strength becomes dangerous. Because strategic people stop reacting impulsively. They think before speaking, observe before trusting, study before acting, and this creates psychological power. Most people reveal themselves too quickly. They talk too much, trust too fast, react too emotionally. But mentally strong people move differently. They understand information is power. The less people know about your mind, the harder you are to manipulate. That is why silence becomes addictive after a certain point. Because silence protects energy. Weak people waste energy trying to impress others. Strong people protect energy, like survival depends on it. Because they understand something most humans ignore. Your attention shapes your destiny. Whatever controls your attention eventually controls your life. And today, almost everyone's attention is hijacked. People cannot focus anymore. They cannot sit quietly, cannot think deeply, cannot control urges, cannot stay disciplined. Modern society profits from weak minds. Think carefully. Why is distraction everywhere? Why are people addicted to noise? Why does silence feel uncomfortable now? Because a distracted mind is easier to control than a focused one. A focused person asks dangerous questions. A distracted person obeys. That is why mentally strong people often disconnect from the crowd. They limit noise, limit drama, limit meaningless relationships. Not because they hate people, but because they value peace more than attention. And peace becomes extremely valuable once you suffer enough chaos. Most people do not realize this until it is too late. They spend years chasing validation, trying to impress strangers, trying to fit in, trying to be accepted, only to realize nobody truly cares. The world moves on quickly. Your pain is temporary to others. Your struggles are invisible to most people. And this truth either breaks a person or frees them, because once you fully understand that nobody is coming to save you, you stop waiting. You stop depending emotionally on others. You stop expecting life to become fair. And suddenly, you become more dangerous than before. Why? Because now your actions are no longer controlled by emotions. They are controlled by clarity. Clarity is terrifying. A clear mind is difficult to manipulate. A clear mind sees through emotional games. A clear mind recognizes weakness inside itself and destroys it. That is why mentally strong people spend more time fighting themselves than fighting others. The real enemy is never outside first. It is inside. Laziness, fear, overthinking, emotional dependency, lack of discipline, need for validation. Most people lose against themselves long before life defeats them. And that is the tragedy of weak minds. They sabotage their own future while blaming the world. Mentally strong people do the opposite. They take responsibility even when life feels unfair, even when nobody helps them, even when they feel exhausted, because they understand one brutal principle. Your emotions do not care about your future. Your discipline does. That is why successful people often appear cold, not because they enjoy hurting others, but because they learn that constant emotional reactions destroy focus. And focus is everything. The modern world trains people to become emotionally weak. Quick dopamine, quick pleasure, quick entertainment. Nobody wants discomfort anymore. Nobody wants silence anymore. Nobody wants discipline anymore. But discomfort builds strength. Silence builds awareness. Discipline builds power. That is why mentally strong people voluntarily choose difficult things. Cold showers, isolation, hard work, self-control, sacrifice. Because suffering sharpens the mind. Comfort weakens it. A comfortable mind becomes lazy. A suffering mind becomes observant. And observant people survive longer. This is why many powerful men throughout history lived harsh lives willingly. Warriors trained in pain. Monks trained in silence. Kings trained in pressure. Because pressure reveals character. When life becomes difficult, masks fall off. That confident man suddenly becomes insecure. That loyal friend suddenly disappears. That loving person suddenly changes. Pressure exposes everyone, including you, and mentally strong people understand this deeply. That is why they trust actions more than words. Words are easy. Anyone can promise loyalty during comfortable times. But pressure reveals truth, always. And once you experience enough pressure, you stop expecting perfection from people. You stop romanticizing human nature. You stop believing everyone has good intentions. Instead, you become careful, calm, observant, dangerous. Not dangerous because you want violence. Dangerous because your mind is no longer naive. And a man who is no longer naive becomes difficult to fool. That alone changes everything. Because now, you stop chasing approval. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You stop lowering your standards just to keep people around. You finally understand something powerful. Being alone is far better than being surrounded by fake people. And this realization creates emotional freedom, the type of freedom most people never experience. Because most people remain trapped inside emotional dependency forever. They need constant reassurance, constant attention, constant validation. Without it, they feel empty. But mentally strong people build internal stability. Their confidence comes from self-respect, not applause. That is why criticism affects them less. Rejection affects them less. Loneliness affects them less, because they already survived worse things inside their own minds. And once a person survives internal chaos, external chaos loses power over them. That is the final transformation. When fear stops controlling you, when emotions stop controlling you, when loneliness stops controlling you, at that point, you stop behaving like prey, and the world notices it immediately. The moment the world realizes you are no longer easy to manipulate, everything changes. People start testing you differently. Some will provoke you emotionally, just to see if they can still control your reactions. Some will disappear, just to see if you chase them. Some will disrespect you quietly, because strong people make weak people uncomfortable. And this is where most men fail, because the greatest test of mental strength is not pain. It is restraint. Anyone can become emotional. Anyone can scream. Anyone can lose control, but remaining calm while chaos surrounds you, that is rare. That is power. True mental strength is terrifying because it creates emotional independence. And emotionally independent people cannot be controlled through fear, guilt, loneliness, or validation. Think about it carefully. What controls most humans? Fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, fear of failure, fear of being disliked. Entire lives are built around avoiding those fears. People fake personalities to fit in, stay in toxic relationships to avoid loneliness, remain weak because they fear criticism. But mentally strong people slowly detach from those fears. And the moment fear loses control over you, people lose control over you too. That is why strong minds often look cold from the outside, because they stop reacting the way society expects them to react. They stop begging, stop over-explaining, stop seeking approval from everyone around them. And weak people misunderstand this completely. They call it arrogance. But there is a difference between arrogance and self-control. Arrogant people think they are above others. Mentally strong people simply stop depending on others emotionally. That is a completely different thing. The dangerous part is, once you reach this level of mental discipline, your entire view of life changes. You begin understanding human nature more clearly. You realize loyalty is tested during hardship, not comfort. You realize respect matters more than attention. You realize silence reveals more than words ever can. And most importantly, you realize peace is more valuable than popularity. That is why mentally strong people become extremely selective with who enters their life, because they know energy is limited, and wrong people drain it quickly. A weak mind seeks entertainment constantly. A strong mind seeks clarity. There is a huge difference. Clarity forces you to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. Maybe you wasted years chasing approval. Maybe you allowed disrespect because you feared losing people. Maybe you stayed weak because comfort felt safer than discipline. Most people avoid these realizations forever because self-awareness hurts. It destroys illusions, and illusions are addictive. Some people would rather live comfortably inside lies than painfully inside truth. But mentally strong people choose truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because pain teaches lessons comfort never will. Pain exposes fake friends. Pain exposes weak habits. Pain exposes emotional dependency. And eventually, pain either destroys you or rebuilds you into someone sharper. That is why the strongest people often have the darkest pasts. They were not born mentally strong. They were forced to become strong through betrayal, through humiliation, through isolation, through suffering nobody else saw. Every painful experience slowly removed their innocence, until one day, they stopped viewing life emotionally and started viewing it realistically. That realism changes everything, because reality does not reward excuses. Reality rewards adaptation. The people who survive the hardest situations are rarely the most emotional. They are the most disciplined, the calmest, the most psychologically controlled. That is why emotional control is one of the highest forms of power. A man who controls his impulses can outperform naturally talented people. A man who controls his anger can avoid self-destruction. A man who controls his desires can focus longer than everyone around him. And focus is becoming rarer every year. Most people today are mentally exhausted, not because life is too hard, but because their minds are constantly overstimulated. Too much noise, too much comparison, too much distraction. Their attention is scattered everywhere, and a scattered mind becomes weak. That is why mentally strong people protect their focus aggressively. They understand that every distraction steals life force. Every meaningless argument steals energy. Every fake relationship steals peace. So they become ruthless with their priorities. Not cruel, ruthless. There is a difference. Cruel people hurt others for pleasure. Ruthless people remove anything that destroys their future. And sometimes, that includes people. This is one of the hardest lessons in mental strength. You cannot evolve while staying attached to environments that weaken you. Sometimes growth requires isolation. Sometimes growth requires walking away silently. Sometimes growth requires becoming the villain in someone else's story. And mentally strong people accept this, because they understand something weak people never do. Not everyone is meant to continue the journey with you. Some people only exist for one chapter of your life, nothing more. Once you understand this, letting go becomes easier, and that emotional detachment creates freedom. Freedom from toxic approval. Freedom from emotional dependency. Freedom from fear. That is the ultimate form of mental strength. When your peace no longer depends on external circumstances, not money, not relationships, not attention, not validation, just internal control. Because external things can disappear overnight. People change. Feelings change. Life changes. But if your mind remains stable, you survive all of it. That is why mentally strong people move differently. They speak carefully, trust slowly, observe deeply, not because they hate humanity, but because experience taught them caution. And caution keeps people alive psychologically. The world often glorifies emotional expression, but hidden beneath all power is emotional discipline. Warriors understood it. Kings understood it. Strategists understood it. A man who loses control of his emotions loses control of himself. And once you lose control of yourself, the world controls you easily. That is why the strongest minds are usually calm. Not because they feel nothing, but because they mastered what they feel. And mastering your own mind is one of the rarest achievements in existence. Most people spend their entire lives controlled by impulses, controlled by fear, controlled by pleasure, controlled by validation. Very few ever become truly free, because freedom requires sacrifice. Sacrifice of comfort, sacrifice of ego, sacrifice of emotional weakness. And most people are unwilling to pay that price. But the ones who do become different from everyone else. Their presence changes. Their eyes change. Their energy changes. You can feel it without them speaking. Because suffering leaves marks on people, not always physically, psychologically. Some people come out of pain broken. Others come out dangerous. And dangerous people are not always violent. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is simply the one who has mastered himself completely. The one who no longer panics, no longer begs, no longer chases, no longer fears loneliness. That kind of mental strength terrifies people, because it cannot be controlled. So remember this carefully. Mental strength is not built in comfort. It is built in darkness, in isolation, in discipline, in suffering, in silent battles nobody sees. And if you survive those battles long enough, you eventually become someone the world cannot easily break anymore. A calm mind, a disciplined mind, a dangerous mind.